We're back again with God Answers Prayer. Our GAP Facebook testimony page is going to be filling up, but this is only the second of two testimonies that we've gathered so far. We have others that we have in line, but today we have a very, very special guest, and that is Pastor Randy Skeete. And we welcome you here today. We've really enjoyed and been blessed by your preaching here, and so welcome to GAP.
Well, thanks, Pastor Williams. I have also been highly blessed to be here with the members of the Chula Vista Seventh-day Adventist Church. I'm always asked, what is your story? How did you come to Christ? And I do not have a spectacular story. I always tell people I grew up in a Christian home. My mother was a very Christian woman. She still is. A woman that's constant prayer, very serious about her spiritual life. And we grew up in the Catholic Church. I was a little boy, and I served as an acolyte, or what is better known as an altar boy with the priest. And I had a desire to be a priest. And the local priest, I believe the story goes, saw something in me that suggested to him, this boy will be a good priest. And I think my mother found out. Also, my sister tells me. So my mother was appropriately alarmed and withdrew us from the church when she heard the priest had his eyes on me. And she sent us to another church, a Sunday keeping church. And she wasn't satisfied with the level of Bible instruction. That was one of her criticisms of the Catholic Church, not enough Bible instruction. So she kept us home, and we were probably 8, 9, 10 that age. Then she sent us to the Salvation Army Church. This is in Barbados, by the way. Then she kept us at home. She was not satisfied. And somehow she came into contact with the Sabbath truth. I believe she was listening to a program by that old preacher called Herbert W. Armstrong, who had a church called The World Tomorrow. Yeah. And they used to believe in the Sabbath. I don't believe they do that now. The church has splintered. And she heard it. However she did, she was immediately convicted, and she inquired of a friend of ours about anyone who goes to church on Sabbath. She'd never heard of it. And the friend happened to be a Seventh-day Adventist, and we didn't know. So she spoke to him, and I think the very next Sabbath, we jumped into a taxi and went to his church. That's in Bridgetown, Barbados. And that's over 40 years ago, and we never left. So that's really my story. I just grew up with a mother who is very spiritual up to this day at the age of 92.
And does she pray for you?
Oh, I know she prays for me, whether I hear her or not. My mother prays for her children very earnestly. I mean, she prays from her bowels for her children.
So you see, God answers prayer for you, the prayers of your mother. Amen.
And I won't argue with that at all.
All right.
Sometimes I travel in remote places because the Lord takes me all over the world, all 6 continents. And I say to myself, my mother's prayers are following me wherever I go. Now, I have to do my part to be faithful, but I know without a doubt that my mother's prayers have pursued me all over the world, and I'm tremendously grateful to my mother for her spiritual influence in my life. There was another lady who influenced me very highly at my local church in Bridgetown, Barbados. Her name was Sister Daniels, and she died many years ago. She liked me and adopted me as her son, so every Thursday I would go to her house for lunch. And she told me a story that occurred in her own life. When she became an Adventist, her husband did not like it. And so he put a gun to her head and told her, you're not going to church. Oh. And she got up from wherever she was. He pointed the gun at her, and wherever she was in the house or the room, she got up and walked straight towards him and told him, you have to shoot me because I will be going to church. And she said he turned around, ran out of the house, and never came back. And I was so moved by her faithfulness. So my mother is number one, and this Sister Daniel, may God guard the spot where she lies. Those two have had the greatest spiritual influence on my life. And I always knew as a boy that I should preach. And in the church coming up in Barbados, we had a practice every Sabbath afternoon. The young people had to recite memory verses. You had to learn a new verse every day, plus the memory verse for the lesson. So every week you had to recite 8 new verses. And it was nothing unusual among us. That's just the way we grew up. And you'd go to the conference every quarter and get what was called, I think, the morning watch, which contained all the memory verses for that year. And that's how I grew up. The habit remained with me. And I love memorizing Bible verses, Ellen White quotations. I just love to do it. So that is my unspectacular story as to my Christian walk. as it is called.
Well, it's a story of God's love for you and your mother's love, and the love of Mrs. What was her name?
Skeete, Maydis,
No,
my wife.
No.
Oh, Mrs. Sister Daniels.
Yes,
Sister Daniels,
that
yes,
story,
yes.
Well, maybe you could just tell us how you progressed from there. Did you go to Christian schools?
Yes, I attended,
university?
as a boy, I attended a Catholic school, elementary school, and then, high school, non-Adventist. Then for college, I went to a school in Jamaica called West Indies College. It's now some sort of university. Then from there, I went to Oakwood College, which is now a university. Then from there to Andrews University. And I did English and theology in college, and theology at the graduate level. And I always knew I had to be a preacher, always knew. So I never had that struggle. God chooses some people, and He puts such a burden on them that they really can't turn to the right or to the left. And I always knew, regardless of whatever else I may do, I had to preach. And so I would work and preach. And eventually I gave up the work so I could be free just to preach. Whenever I'm called, I go. So that's my story. The Lord has taken me, as I said, to the 6 continents on the earth. I love going to East Africa and Southern Africa and Southeast Asia. So from Ethiopia all down to South Africa, and from, Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, those countries. And that's the 2 areas where I truly love, and the Lord takes me there all the time. Now, I go wherever I'm called.
And San Diego. You love San Diego.
Well, I love San Diego, yes. Yes, I do love San Diego. I really do. I love the people, I love the church, and I love the area. So it's a privilege for me to be at Chula Vista again. And if the Lord works it out, I will gladly come back.
Amen.
But my desire is to serve God until I die, and to be faithful to Him.
We are very, very thankful that you have been thus called, and we're blessed by your preaching, brother. Thank you so much for being with us.
The privilege was entirely mine. I thank God for it, and God bless you, Pastor Williams, as you lead His flock in this part of the world.
Thank you.
Every Christian has a story to tell, and we want to know, what's yours? You'll never know how your story of coming to Christ could help impact someone's life if you don't share it. Tell us your story via email, Facebook, Twitter, or even upload a video to YouTube and tell us about it. If you know a loved one that's going through some tough times and find a story on here that they can relate to, share it with them and see how God can use one person's testimony to help encourage and even change the life of another. This testimony was recorded at the Chula Vista Seventh-day Adventist Church in Chula Vista, California. If you're in our neighborhood and would like to pay us a visit, ask for prayer, or simply want to get more information about who we are and what we believe, visit our website at chulavista.sda.org or call us at 619-422-0405. Gap Testimonies. God answers prayers, and you just saw some proof of that.